Hi and welcome. In this tutorial, we're going to see how to create a mini map like this. So the mini map will display the player as an icon. So when we move the player, you can see the player is also moving in the mini map. We'll be going step by step in this tutorial. We'll be seeing how to add the icon for the player. We'll see how to add a second camera to act as your mini map. And we'll also see how to use the mask and how to add the circular borders to your mini map. So let's get started. So what you see here is a low poly scene that is downloaded from Unity Asset Store. So if you want to follow along, the link is there in the description. You can go ahead and download this asset. And what I've done is I've just added a capsule to it. So this is my player capsule, and the camera is in the first person view. So the camera is a child of the capsule. So I've written a simple script to move the player left and right. So when we play the game, we're able to move forward and we are able to move backward, left and right through the arena. So to create a mini map, we'll be using another camera in the scene. So let's go ahead and add another camera. So let's rename the main camera as maybe FPS camera. So we'll just delete main FPS camera. Okay, so we have another camera on the scene now. So we'll call this Minimap camera. So now we have a Minimap camera and an FPS camera. So the Minimap camera will have to remove the audio listener. So you should never have two audio listeners in one scene. So remember that. Remember to remove this component. Now we want this Minimap camera to basically look down upon us from a height, and it should be orthographic. So we'll have a 2D map of the whole terrain. Let's go to the scene view. So let's make sure that the Minimap camera is at the center of the terrain. Okay. Then we want it to be in orthographic mode. Okay, and we want the background to be in solid color. We'll set it to black. We want it to be looking down on us from a top position. Then it should also be looking down, so let's rotate it maybe 90. Then we don't need such a high far clipping plane, so we'll just set it to maybe like 100, and then we'll increase the size to something like 50 so that we're able to cover more ground. So we'll try to align it with the terrain. So we'll rotate it the y-axis till it aligns with the terrain. Okay, that should be fine. Now if you want to cover more ground, you can increase the size, or you can decrease the size and show only a part of the terrain and make the camera a child of your player so that it moves with your player. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to just keep it static. So when the player moves, we'll be able to see the player move inside the minimap camera. So now our camera view is set. Now since we are covering a large area, the player is basically not visible to us. So what we can do is we'll create an icon for the player and display it on top of the player so that our minimap camera will be able to pick it up. So for that, let's add a quad as a child to our player. So it will be under 3D object quad. So let's go to the player now. Okay, so the quad is somewhere here. We'll keep the quad above the player and we'll make sure that the quad is facing the minimap camera. So let's rotate it in the X by 90. Yeah, and increase the size to maybe 10 in X and 10 in Y. So now the quad is big enough so that it will be visible in the camera. So you can see here, there's a big square here when you're looking from the top down. So you'll know this is the player. So you can display an image on the quad using a material. So go ahead and create a new material. So I already have the material set up, the new material here. Make sure the render mode is set to cutout, and in the albedo you set the image for the player. So I'm going to use this image. Make sure it has a transparent background. Now you can adjust the color based on whether it is visible to you or not. So we'll assign the new material to the quad. Okay, and now if you go to the game, you're able to see the icon in place of the quad. The quad that we're using to display the icon has a mesh collider component, which we do not require, so remove that. Also, we don't want the quad to basically create shadows, so we'll switch off shadows for it. So after that, we also don't want to show everything in the minimap camera. We want to know where the player is, and we want to give an overview of the location. So we'll just remove all the stones and trees from the minimap render view. And to do that is we'll just select the environment and the mountings, the major ones. So this will basically create all the large ones, and we'll create a layer called terrain and add it to that. Also, the player quad game object will add it to a layer called minimap. Now inside our minimap camera, we'll use the culling mask to basically display only the minimap and terrain. Now with the view and the icon set, the next step is to display the minimap. Now there are multiple ways to do it. One option is using the viewport of the camera. So you can just select the camera minimap and adjust the viewport rect. So something like this. So you will have a viewport on the top. The disadvantage of this method is you cannot edit the looks of the minimap. So this will also work, but you cannot edit the looks of the minimap. It is going to look in the rectangular shape, and you cannot add any extra graphics to it. So we'll use an UI image to render the camera output. And basically in that case, you can use a mask and UI image elements to change the look of your minimap. So we'll reset this back to 0 and 0. Okay. To display the camera's view into a UI image, you're going to need something called as a render texture. So to create a render texture, just right click, go to create and click on render texture. So I've created a render texture here called Minimap render texture. So make sure the size is set to 256 cross 256. So once you've created the Minimap render texture, select your Minimap camera and under target texture, just drag and drop your Minimap render texture. So now the camera will go from the game view. So we have to add it back. So for that, we'll be using the UI. So first we'll add a canvas, UI canvas. So it will add the canvas and the event system. Now under canvas, we're going to add an empty game object and we're going to call it as minimap. Now hold on Alt key, click on the anchor presets and click on the stretch preset. Now under minimap, we are going to add another UI element. In this case, we are going to add a raw image. The reason we are not using a regular image is a regular image is not capable of displaying a render texture. So we'll have to use a raw image. So this raw image, we'll rename it as minimap display. So we'll call it as minimap, display. Hold on Alt key again and set it to the bottom right corner. And in the texture part, we're going to assign the render texture there. So now you can see that your minimap is visible here, and you can also change the color if you don't like it. Like you can make it little reddish or little greenish. So depending on how you want it, you can change it. So your minimap is now functionally ready. So if you play the game, so if you move the player in the actual world, the player is also moving in the minimap. Now to create a circular minimap, you're going to need two images, one for the border and one for the mask. So I have two images here, a mask image and a border image. Under minimap, the empty game object, add two more UI images. Okay, this is going to be your mask image. Then you're going to add one more UI image, which is going to be border. Now select both these images, hold on Alt key and set it to bottom right. Do it for the border too. Okay. Now for the mask image, assign the mask image as the sprite, and for the border, assign the border image as the sprite. Select the mask image game object and click on add component. Find a component called mask. Now once you added the mask component, make the minimap display, which is basically the render texture that is displaying your minimap, as child of the mask image. This will basically cut off everything that is outside the mask image. So now you have a circular display. Now adjust the size of the camera if you're not able to see the player. So depending on where your player is or how much area you want to show in the map, you can increase the size of the camera or decrease the size of the camera or increase the size of the mask depending on your requirement. So under border, you can also add a shadow if you want. Just click on the add component, search for shadow and adjust the effect distance in X and Y axis. So something like this. So this will give a 3D effects of shadow. Okay, that seems to be good. So now you have a fully functional circular minimap for your game. So if you have any other questions, you can leave them in the comment box below. Thank you and see you in the next tutorial.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share.